Best books I've read so far in 2026. Listen, it's 31 degrees. I'm going to make this video snappy. So far this month we've been doing a retrospective of the year thus far, and finally we've reached the end of the month where we'll be talking about the best books I have read this year. I'm going to leave in the comments, in the description down below even, links for you to pick up these books from booktuber.org, a company that works with small independent booksellers to get them a little bit more of a kickback whenever you buy through them, or get them from your local library. Let's get straight into it. I'm so sweaty. We are starting off with Honey in the Wound. I'm sorry, I've gone on about this book so many times, but it is, I think, the best fiction book I have read this year. Is my camera straight? I don't know. Maybe it is now. This was Ji-Yeon Han's first book, which is insane. For your debut novel to be this impactful, I thought it was, from a plot perspective, very well put together, very intriguing. I wanted to read more. Writing style wise, it was really engaging. There were multiple narratives put together in this, but all the characters were super engaging. Obviously the historical context was also really interesting. You actually learned a lot through it too. And then I guess overall I really enjoyed this book. Well, enjoyed is an interesting way to speak about a book that is very depressing, especially the second half of the book is hurtfully depressing, but it is genuinely a book that I feel like, see, look, I'm not Korean, I'm not of Korean descent, but I feel like this sort of book is something I think if this book were set in South Asia and was talking about British colonialism and the horrors of British colonialism, it would be the kind of book where I'm like, this is like a book that we need to read, and then hopefully triggers people to go off and learn more about the history of occupied Korea. Learn the history of what the Japanese colonizers did, not just in Korea, but also in China as well. So I thought it was a very heart-wrenching read, and is definitely the best fiction book I have read this year. Is that purple or pink? There's the pink. Up next is Hamas, A Beginner's Guide. Listen, again, I'm pretty sure I made a whole video about this, or at least a section of a video about this. This book, I think, is a must-read if you are pro-Palestinian, if you actually really care about the plight of the Palestinian people. Oftentimes we are inundated with propaganda, and obviously the past 2 to 3 years it has been very heavily about Hamas and spreading misinformation about Hamas. This book goes into the history, the founding of Hamas. It goes into the documents that are often misquoted. It goes into the evolution of those documents. It goes into the political aspect of Hamas, and it goes into the current understanding of Hamas as a group. And you get misinformation about the group from both the Israeli lobby, but also people who pretend to be pro-Palestine. Often I would describe them as liberal Zionists, people who kind of both sides things, will say, well, I just want peace on both sides was as bad as each other, and it ignores a lot of the colonial history of Palestine and what causes groups like Hamas to rise in popularity over time. A group that themselves did not even expect to become popular amongst the masses. It is a very good book, very well researched, very detailed, addresses and debunks things from, like I mentioned, both sides of the aisle. I think it is a very, very important book to read. And look, The Guardian also reviewed this book, so YouTube, you can't say anything about me. The Guardian also said it was a very timely introduction, so it's a timely read. Up next is another non-fiction book. It is Reform or Revolution by Rosa Luxemburg. This is the first work of Rosa Luxemburg I've read, at least the first full work. I think I've read her shorter extracts before, and phenomenal read. Really easy to easier to understand. I wouldn't say easy to understand, but easier to understand. Really get a great breakdown as to how you cannot reform the system, and that reform isn't the solution to ending capitalism, something that unfortunately I think many groups in the modern day are trying to pitch towards people to move them away from actually wanting to achieve a proletarian revolution to try and appease workers. You see the rise of democratic socialist groups across Europe and the Americas even. And, you know, I do understand people being like, oh, it's a step in the right direction. But at the end of the day, as Luxemburg goes into great detail in this, you cannot reform the capitalist system. You know, even if you try and make some changes to the capitalist system, inevitably the goal of capitalism and the goal of imperialism will be to inevitably exploit the working classes for their labor and enrich the bourgeois classes. And, you know, any of the reforms being put forward are like a band-aid. You know, they will plaster over a couple of the issues, but the wound is still festering, the wound is still growing, and it will just get deeper and worse unless we systematically change everything. And Luxemburg goes into great detail. Like, she goes into significantly better explanation than I just gave. She gives, you know, examples from obviously her time period, you know, about, you know, the Social Democrats, the Democratic Socialists of the era, and even during Marx's time as well. So really, if you are a Marxist, you've got to read Rosa Luxemburg, in my opinion. Quickly, because I've spoken about it in previous videos, Impossible Monsters. This book is about the history of dinosaurs, particularly in Britain, and how that history has shaped science and culture throughout not just this country, but the world. It is a great read if you are interested in English history, interested in scientific history, and interested in dinosaurs, so you should pick this up. And the final book I want to talk about, and I thought I was going to put a fiction book, but I've changed my mind. I'm going to put Revolucy by David Raybrook, I think is the correct way of saying it. This book is about the history of Indonesia, particularly Indonesian colonialism by the Europeans and their inevitable independence. Not just Europeans, actually, Europeans, Americans, and the Japanese. I'll have to correct myself there. This book really opened my eyes to Indonesia. I have reasons for wanting to learn more about Indonesia, but it really showed me the history of Indonesia. As someone who is South Asian, you know, I know a lot about colonialism, or particularly the Indian subcontinent, not all of South Asia, obviously. I know a lot about that. So then learning about the colonization and actually the independence movement that basically inspired a lot of other independence movements, or at the very least inspired the way they went afterwards, is really important to me. And, you know, personally, again, wanting to learn more about Indonesia's history. It was so detailed. I want to go off and read Raybrook's book on the Congo. He is a Belgian man who lives in the Netherlands, so obviously I do want to read his book on the Congo as a Belgian as well to see what he says. But obviously this man, he kind of, I believe in the introduction, goes into great detail about how the kind of the methodology he went through to meet people from Indonesia and people who had part of the Indonesian diaspora and interview them, and even Japanese people who lived in Indonesia at the time. He hunted down people who were in the various armies, even the Dutch army as well, whistleblowers from the Dutch army, people who weren't even in, obviously Indonesia didn't have an official army during their independence. It was just like militia groups, student groups as well. It's not just also the revolutionary years, it is everything leading up to that. It is the start of Dutch colonialism, the reasons behind it, and how it got worse and worse over time. And then when the Japanese came and what the Japanese did to Indonesians, and then what the Americans did and what the British did to Indonesians, until they eventually got their independence. And then even after independence, the Americans came in and have basically shaped Indonesia as to where it is right now for basically the worse. So it is an incredible book. It is like this big. It is a big read, but if you are interested in Southeast Asian history, if you are interested in Indonesia like I am, I genuinely go pick this up. If not for that Hamas book, this probably would be my #1 non-fiction book of the year so far, and I've read, as always, a majority non-fiction, but very, very good, very interesting read. Okay, it's very hot and I don't have any water with me and I'm feeling dehydrated. So let's get to the outro. Like I said, you can pick up these books from the description down below from bookshop.org or get them from your local library. Let me know the best books you have read so far this year. I'm always interested in hearing what you guys have read. And if you want to hear even more from me, you can become a member. Members get access to movie clubs, book clubs. They're going to get an essay actually at the end of this week, which is going to be the first one that the members are getting. There's also going to be actually 2 additional videos for members going out this month as well. They don't even know that. Maybe that will come out before this video comes out. I don't know. And yeah, you get a lot more. So you can join from as little as £1 a month by hitting the join button down below or on my channel. But regardless, thank you for getting to this part of the video. If you are in anywhere that is experiencing a heat wave, please stay hydrated, stay indoors. If you have pets, keep them safe, keep yourself safe, keep everyone around you safe. Stay cool, and remember, the climate crisis is the greatest existential threat to humans right now, so, you know, try and get involved. I've not read any climate books this year thus far. I'm sorry, I would have mentioned one. Like, subscribe to the video, friend or family member, and hey, I hope you read a great book today. I need to go get some water.